Parik Goswami, the Professor of Textiles from Huddersfield University and also a board member of UKFT, is going to chair this session. Parik, so if I could ask you to come up, thank you very much. And also if I can ask Ian from Johnson's to join us back on the stage. Paul Johnson, the Executive Chair of WT Johnson, who've recently been awarded the Responsible Wool Standard, and Lizzie Dakin, UKFT Sustainability Manager, who has a lot of industry experience, but also helped write the first edition of UKFT's Sustainability 101.
Thank you very much, Adam. So this morning, firstly, good afternoon, everybody. This morning, when Adam, you showed that slide with 5 million standards, I was really praying that you don't go through each one of them, right? And that is kind of the purpose of this discussion. The discussion is, does certification drive business? Let's take a step back, right? Sustainability. There are so many different shades to it, right? Means we are talking about environment, social, animal welfare, economical, product, service, manufacturing. Now, another set of data that UKFT collected is 21% of UK manufacturers do not hold, it says standards, I'll not use that word, certification, right? For a new company, for this 29% of the companies who don't have any certification at this moment, could you give some advice how they can start that journey? What is the starting point?
The starting point, understanding that it's required. It can be looked for from regulators, from customers, B2B, B2C. But actually, I think these things are an opportunity to learn about how your company works and to look for opportunities that perhaps your competitors aren't seeing. If you can get a step ahead, then maybe there's competitive advantage in that. Certainly, if a certification is of a decent quality, then it will help you prepare for what's coming in terms of legislation and expectations and resource depletion as your business model sort of fit for purpose. So I think certifications are essential, but I don't think all certifications are born equal. I think you have to be very careful about which ones you pick and why.
Will you mind elaborating on that a bit? Because you went for B Corporation. What kind of framework you have used to go for that certification rather than others?
You would have to ask the board really about that. But I mean, I guess the biggest thing was they just felt that the sort of social and environmental priority was in alignment with the culture and aspirations of the company. And the fact that it is an assessment tool which is based on a science, so it is a science-based target, science-based framework rather. So there's use in it, but I think it was just a very obvious way for the owners to make it clear that's what Johnson's is about.
That is brilliant. Means my last kind of question, not question, I'll ask for a comment. When we look at the B Corporation framework, there are 5 or 6 evaluation criteria: governance, workers, community, environment, etc. It really sounds as complicated as university governance. So can you reassure the team that when colleagues out here that the difficult bit is to start the journey and then things fall into place?
Yes, I can reassure you, but based on what you've just said, don't underestimate it. But at the same time, what is more important than sustainability now? What can be more important? You know, when we're in a world where, you know, the planetary boundaries update was released 2 weeks ago, 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries have been crossed. What's more important than sustainability? Profitability, yes, of course, but you know the two can coexist. So I would say absolutely do it, because it's a learning process. You can learn all kinds of things, and if you don't do it, how are you going to justify that?
So I'll come to you, Natalie, just for continuation. The same question, why STEP? What was the framework to come to that decision?
It was the 6 key areas that it addressed. Again, we felt that it sat with our business priorities, so quality is always important, environmental management, performance, health and safety, and the social aspect. It was wide-reaching, and it wasn't. There's lots of specialist qualifications in each of those pathways, and we felt at the start of that journey we wanted to do something that was broad and wide-reaching as a baseline.
Great. For sustainability, there are obviously, if we go down to a granular level, a very important part is to do the carbon calculations, right? And there are so many different frameworks to do that. Obviously, STEP got, if I understand rightly, its own impact measurement tool. Do you think they talk with each other, or boundary conditions are similar?
Yeah, so STEP has a carbon and water impact calculator. It opens up once you get the certification, so that is something that we're going to be looking at next. But we did already have to be doing some of that work in the background, so really quite a simplistic level with scope 1 and 2 on a spreadsheet. And then we've had sort of more and more complex things that we've driven into. But, you know, the scope 3 is listed, kind of just start with one chapter that you think you can manage. So maybe staff travel is a simple one. And that would be my advice with all qualifications, is just start and have the qualification and the willingness, the conversation, and the willingness to really do that. So yeah, we're looking forward to using the impact calculator and transferring the data that we've already collected and seeing how that's going to help us in the future.
Brilliant. Now, just to give some context, after you do STEP, if you do standard 100, then you get Made in Green certification.
Give us a little bit of a rest first. I think in the slides showing you the complexity of the business, and that's probably the biggest challenge for product certification with us, which is why we focused on our site, our facility and our processes, because it allows that chain to stay intact. So when a customer chooses to do product certification, we keep that link. Traditionally, testing has always kind of sat with the customer, because we don't always know what product the fabric's going to be made into, we don't know what geographical location it's being sold into, so to do all the testing that anyone might require is a bit of a shot in the dark. So it's about having that conversation with customers, and some will choose to do 100. We buy in more and more Ecotex 100 yarn alongside other yarn certifications. So for us, it's that complexity of weaving sort of 20,000 unique different composition fabrics every year is a challenge.
So it's a big step up from that stage. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll come to you, Paul, now. If you don't mind introducing yourself first.
Yeah. So, Paul Johnson, Executive Chairman of WT Johnson's. We are cloth finishers. It's important for you to know that we are processors. So we're not actually making anything, we're just processing fabric. And we're the bit that comes between weaving and making garments or whatever the end use happens to be. We're based in Huddersfield, and we're usually working with wool and natural fibres.
Great. Paul, I understand you subscribe towards responsible wool standards. Again, you had various choices. Why responsible wool standard?
Yeah, well, we were driven by our customers, to be honest. And, you know, part of this is around, does certification drive business? The answer is yes, with this one, which is good news. Some of you won't know what it is, I'm sure. Effectively, RWS is the responsible wool standard. There's also a responsible mohair standard and a responsible alpaca standard. You can get all three underneath the responsible animal fibre standard, which is the one that we've got. But it doesn't actually particularly apply to us, because all the standards are concerned with conditions on the farm. So these are about the production of the fibre, and they apply in the areas of animal welfare, land management and social welfare. And then each section is broken down into specific criteria which allows the farmer to go to the marketplace and claim that the fleece has been produced in accordance with the appropriate standard. All the bit that the supply chain has to do is prove that what comes into the supply chain comes out the other end. That's the main issue, and that is handled by content claimed standard. So in a typical supply chain, the spinner would make yarn, which he would say is 100% certified, the weaver, the cloth, the tailor, the suit, and so it goes on. And although the name of the item can change from fleece to fabric to suit, the content claim doesn't. In other words, 100% of the wool has been produced in accordance with the standard. So all we really need to do is make sure that we satisfy the criteria of the content claimed standard, which is to make sure that we don't risk the piece losing its identity, risk fibre getting commingled, or risk substitution. As long as we can do that, then we've done our part. But it is absolutely clear that the consumers and the market are demanding this sort of reassurance about how their fibre are created. In our higher value customers, in other words, people who probably create high value garments for discerning markets, they've seen increases in RWS certified fibre by 21% of their entire turnover in a 12-month period, which is amazing, really. You know, up from very, very little. So in this particular wool apparel market, it's catching on fast. And it will be demanded by retailers and consumers. That's why people have done it.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. Means that obviously the chain of custody model, it's all about the whole supply chains health, right? Now,
yep.
There is a lot of discussion around, say, the UK wool manufacturers. It's very difficult for them to subscribe to the responsible wool standard, and British wool got their own standard. I might ask somebody to make a comment later, Andrew, later on. What is your thought about this?
Well, yeah, I do, because I'm not a farmer. So I don't really know. But I would imagine that there'll be a cost implication for the size of the farm and the size of the industry. And also, of course, there's a lot less British wool going into high-value apparel. You know, lots of it is going into other uses rather than the one that we're talking about here.
Thank you very much. Do you want to make some comments on that, Andrew, if we can? Is there...
Thank you, Parik. So I'm Andrew Hogley, CEO of British Wool, essentially representing the 35,000 sheep farmers of the UK. Paul's absolutely right. RWS is a scheme for merino, essentially. Absolutely doesn't work in terms of the UK landscape, but we don't need it to work for the UK landscape. What we have in welfare legislation, environmental standards, is enshrined in law. So it's been clear that where there is a standard, you need to understand why it's there in the first place. If you don't need a standard for UK farmers, don't expect UK farmers to subscribe to it. Now, the value of wool on a UK farm, £150 a year. The cost of getting RWS, $2,000. Doesn't stack up.
Thanks, Andrew. And there is a reason why we wanted to open up this discussion. It's just to say one size fits all don't work. And there is a reason why that many standards exist. Choosing the right standard and having some help with that is really important. And on that note, I want to come to UKFT, right? UKFT, firstly, I have actually read the Sustainability 101. It's really a good starting point. Could you please elaborate on the journey a bit more? Because green claim legislations are coming. Lizzie, please introduce yourself, and then let's go into that.
Hi everyone, so I'm Lizzie. I've recently joined UKFT 3 months ago. I've been part of this Sustainability 101 journey. As Adam mentioned, my background is in retail and wholesale, so I've met many of these challenges from a retail perspective. Coming into this 101, part of that journey when meeting green claims is part of that verification of standards. So whether that's through a standard or through an LCA, you now need to prove the standard that you're working with as a way of verifying your green claims. So we're seeing lots of different green claims legislation globally from US, Australia, all over. And it's really important to get it right, basically. Whilst at the moment it's very much a B2C conversation, and a lot of the guidelines around this is focused on that, it's actually imperative that B2B have that transfer of knowledge, of information, and make those accurate green claims.
That is great. And you will be bringing a document guiding industry on that.
Yeah, so the next issue will be centred around green claims legislation, how to make accurate green claims, how to evidence those green claims. Just like everything else in sustainability, is very, very complex, and we just want to give the right support and guidance and guidelines just to help you make compliant green claims.
That is great. Recently, we were having a discussion, I think you were part of that, and Adam, and we were discussing that we think there is a genuine appetite in the industry now to do the right thing, right? To do the right thing. Obviously, there is a business need to it, but there is a real appetite to do the right thing. To do the right thing, we need the right people. UKFT recently did a survey which says 53% of UK businesses don't have a sustainability manager. Or a dedicated person for sustainability. I want to open up the floor a bit. At your end, do you see that problem as a chronic problem, that you are not getting the skills? It might be at a managerial level, at a factory floor level. Who want to take that?
I don't mind taking that. I think we always have in our kind of role profiles externally when we're advertising a willingness to learn. And that applies to all jobs and definitely for sustainability. So, you know, the rest of the team are here today that we focus on. My day job is a sales manager, so I have a background in sales and design. But really, it's sparked my interest. It's something I think that's really important, and that's the driver for getting involved within the business. It isn't employing somebody to fill that gap and pick that box. It's about having people that work internally that are passionate about that change and that future, and that's really what we're looking for, is that match with our values, and people that are willing to go to the conferences and read up online and learn things and have those conversations, and for us that's what we look for.
Thank you very much.
Kind of, do I think there's a lack of people who really get it? Yes. Because it's a complex subject. So the way we're kind of approaching it is using these frameworks, and we bring people in by department and then say, this is how it applies to you. This is how it applies to wet finishing. This is how it applies to weaving. This is how it applies to human resource. And make it relevant to their jobs. I can't be an expert in everything sustainability in the company. It's impossible. But I can train people and then find people like you've done, I think, find champions, people who are genuinely interested, and then help them to do it, and in that way build that culture change in the way that health and safety is now accepted. Within 10 years, sustainability will be the same because it needs to be.
I can totally see. I'll summarize this a bit, but Paul, do you want to comment on that? I know you have opinions.
No, well, it's a bit like having imposter syndrome, isn't it, being sat up here with people who know what they're talking about sustainability, because I'm probably one of the people that doesn't really. But that won't stop me saying something. So we're a family business, fourth generation, and one of our values amongst 6 is do the right thing. And I'm not necessarily sure that we need a certificate to tell us how to do the right thing. And actually part of doing the right thing is about business anyway. So I think my view is slightly dictated by the fact that we are processors, that our customers send us stuff, they say, here's the job that you have to do, we do it, we send it back to them. So my view is I can't really affect what goes on before me very well, because I'm not buying any product, I'm not sourcing anything, I'm buying people's wages and I'm buying gas and electricity, that's about it. So there's only so many things that I can control, and doing the right thing for me means looking after your people, training and development, making sure that you use as less resources as you can, and actually making sure that the emissions that go out your factory as least as you can. Well, actually, that's doing the right thing, and it also makes business sense. So I think that in the UK, without us knowing it, we have an innate understanding of what sustainability means and doing the right thing. And as you said, you know, we've got also lots of legal frameworks in place that ensure that that happens. But I completely get being driven by the process that has been so interesting to listen to these two today, you know, about how that process can drive you probably to be better than you are at the moment. But I think it's, for me, it would be being guided by the process and making sure that you're on track rather than the certificate itself that would be the attraction.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. Now, what I want to do now is I want to open the floor, not for questions, but for discussions as well. So please feel free to give your comments. Please feel free to give your suggestions for the universities, for UKFT, because we are part of the same ecosystem. There are representatives from various universities today, so I want to open up the floor for that. I'll start with a comment, right, to help the process. What I'm gathering today, I'm getting a feeling that probably it might also be helpful to have CPD programs rather than just thinking about graduate programs where we are taking different skills and giving them suggestions about sustainability, doing it together with industry associations. And based on your comment, I'll try to do it from the education establishment. You can do it from the UKFT perspective. So based on that, I want to open the floor for discussion and questions to the panel. Please.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Parik. Josh Stewart-Grunbar from the Cloth Workers. I'm just wondering, in the competition for skilled or unskilled labour, particularly amongst younger people in the jobs market, I'm pretty certain, although I haven't interviewed a very young employee recently, that the subject of sustainability is something that's a bit of a selection criteria for them, about the sort of employer, the sort of values that they would want to subscribe to. Is that a problem in terms of attracting them to our industry versus another? Are we seen as a laggard? And I'm sorry, this is a question. And to what extent do they think that the senior management, the board, is really committed to this agenda?
Who want to take that?
I'm actually happy to take that one. We touched on that in the panel I was in last year. It is absolutely a driver for people leaving university. Their kind of baseline knowledge is building with each generation. So they do question us at interview. They do want to see our sustainability policies before they come to interview. So it's really important to them. I don't think they're particularly put off by textiles. They're attracted to businesses that they feel share their values, but they can also see the benefit that they can add. So that's a real driver for them. They feel that they can embed in the team and really make a difference, and I think that's what they focus on.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else wants to?
Well, in terms of the question about the board, I mean, sustainability is a strategic priority, so it has to come from the board and then work its way down. But I was saying this to one of our board members recently, you need to make more noise about it. People in the company know about it because we've gone through B Corp. The chief executive officer is always mentioning it. But they asked me what more they needed to do, and I said, reinforce it, reinforce it, reinforce it. It's important as profit.
I'll actually make a quick comment on that as well. This is my observation that the new students that we are getting in the universities, because of the press, and some rightly so, about the negative press that our industry gets sometimes about pollution, those students are coming with a genuine passion to change things. Genuine passion means they're motivated, they want to do that, and we need to find a way to harness that energy, to channel it in the right directions, and then it will be really bright. Please.
Hello, Ian McLean from John Smedley. My question to the panel, and to anybody else who wants to comment really, is Parik, in particular, just for you to start with, universities are famous for planning forward a long way into the future, because just as an example, if you were to launch a new course, it can take 5 years to plan that and think about what's going to happen in the future, to deliver a program that will then deliver students into the marketplace maybe 10 years into the future. So if you all look forward from where we are today, and my appreciation of where we are today on this particular topic is that what we're experiencing is a kind of pre-Cambrian explosion of ideas. Everybody is using a different set of rules and looking at a different set of ideas that they've picked out of a pot to use. But if you were to look forward some way, do you sense that there will be a certain degree of consolidation of these ideas? Will we all migrate towards one set of standards? Will you be using B Corp in 10 years' time? Will you be using Ecotex in 10 years' time? Or will you be doing something else? Or will simply legislation just mop up everything and we will just be working towards whatever the legislation says? What do you think? Parik first, and then maybe somebody else could chip in.
Yeah, you realize that's not a very easy question to answer, right? Thank you for that. The direction of travel, we all know. It's diversifying even more, and that is why I wanted to bring this British wool and RWS standard discussion. The framework is complex, and therefore that diversification is happening. Do we need to come to one direction? Probably yes. Absolutely yes, and there are some lights to that, right? There are some frameworks, like in UK, Textiles 2030, for example. It's actually showing a direction so that everything can come together in a meaningful way, right, to some extent, and the whole ecosystem is part of that. So we live in hope, and we genuinely think it needs to happen. And university do have a big role to play there. Means life cycle assessment, for example. I'm very keen to see what Steve thinks later on in Steve's presentation, Professor Steve Russell. But life cycle analysis depends on some boundary conditions. You change the boundary condition, the results are completely different. So unification of approach is really important to understand what is the true value. That is kind of my bit. Anybody else in the panel want to take that?
One of the frameworks that I mentioned, called the Framework for Strategic Sustainable Development, is a science-based definition of sustainability according to 3 ecological principles and 1 social principle. They are essentially, it's like, how do you win a game of chess? You checkmate your opponent. There are a billion different ways a game of chess can end up, but if they comply with the principles of checkmate, then you win the game. This is how we're trying to use these 4 principles. If you comply with the principles, then you win the game of sustainability. Every certification, every framework, every tool, if it helps you move towards complying with those principles, then you're on to a winner. How you go about doing it depends on your approach and your company. I personally think Ecotech is I'm going to be talking to you about it because I think it's a really useful one for certain companies if it's correct for you. But it's not so much about the certification process, it's where you're going. And you need to know where you're going. And the more clearly you can define what success looks like, the more chance you have of getting there. And that's what the FSSD is designed to do, regardless of what industry you're in or the size of your company. So that's the kind of way we're trying to approach it.
That's a far better answer than what I have given. Anybody want to top that in the panel?
I believe legislation will change over the next 5 years. It will really shape how things are. We're seeing the rise of things like digital product passports, supply chain due diligence, and this will really shape our industries in changing how we approach things. We've got to be more socially aware. We've got to adhere to different environmental frameworks. So I do believe that over the next 5 years, it will be legislation that pushes this and shapes our industry.
Brilliant. You want to chip in?
Yeah, I mean, we lean on architects for that because they do look at global legislation. So where perhaps we're a little bit behind in the UK in some aspects, we can take the best practice from Europe and the wider market. So that really helps us to kind of stay ahead. I mean, David, who's in the audience, will have flashbacks of going round and round on the government website trying to figure out the testing that we needed and just ending up back where we started. So that's where you do need a framework and some support to work through those things. A few mentions today of the Future Fit business framework as well. That's one we also reference that has some practical applications and some checklists to work through that are, they mean something to the departments that you're dealing with. So it's taking a kind of broad base and filtering it down for your business and taking the best parts of everything that exists.
Absolutely. Mit, I'll summarize this point by saying I take all the point, but I genuinely think some debate around boundary condition needs happening. And harmonification at that basic scientific principles need to happen a bit. And that will take us a long way forward. Again, open to the floor. Questions? Comments?
Hi, I'm Susan from the Haberdashers' Company. I'm regretting putting my hand up already. I think I've got a sort of reflection from the other side of the coin about from the consumer's point of view. When I go and buy my tea in Sainsbury's, I'm bombarded by fair trade, Rainforest Alliance certification, something else that the Red Label, my favourite Sainsbury's Red Label, do. What I'm hearing is lots of different things that I can choose when I buy a piece of clothing. They could say, oh, it's B Corp, or it's some letters I didn't even know about before. So in 10 years' time, what might that look like? Yes, there's going to be legislation, but from a consumer's point of view, how am I going to choose the clothes that I wear based on the certification of the producers and the suppliers and everything else? For me, at the moment, it's quite confusing, and I'm just a regular kind of person. Imagine what it's like for the consumers going to Marks and Spencer's and to Primark and all the rest of it. So I guess I wonder where we'll be in 5 or 10 years' time. Thank you.
My first comment is please join the club. It happens with all of us. Lizzie, do you want to take that first?
I think bringing it back to green claims, one of the principles of making compliant green claims is that it's clear, it's unambiguous, and that what you're saying actually makes sense to the consumer at the end of it. So hopefully, with the rise of green claims, we'll see much more clear information for the consumer to actually understand what, as you said, these different logos actually means. So I think there'll be progression in that.
Adam?
If I could just jump in there, I think the other thing that's going to change the interaction between the industry and consumers is digital product passports. Now, everyone's looking at it in terms of what it means up and down the supply chain, but the end point of digital passports is to give the consumer all the information that they may or may not want. So they will tell you where the fiber's from, what particular farm it might have been grown in, what conditions it's grown in. So there will be a lot of information presented to consumers. So I think there's that step that is going to take place, and the EU legislation is coming in the next few years. What I'm interested in is how engaged the consumers are actually going to be in that information, because we can give them all of the information that we have. Whether they want it, whether they'll change their purchasing decisions based on that information, we'll just have to wait and see. But the digital passports will provide all that information.
To add to that, thanks Adam for that. To add to that, it's also very geographic, location dependent, and there is a lot of publications around that subject. My life is boring enough to look at those as bedtime stories once in a while. And you can really see that if you do a survey in a remote part of India, and probably you can imagine that, and in London, it will be very different but in a way it feels like the gulf is closing a bit. So it will be an interesting journey. Another point I want to make is, again, I'll refer back just to stick with one example, Textile 2030 and other initiatives. They really have framework to understand the consumer behavior. And there are other projects that many of us in the room are part of. Some Adam alluded towards, where we are really trying to understand the very complex problem statement that you have highlighted. Thank you. Can we start? Any other comments? Question? Yes, please.
I think it's to open it up to everybody, really, but mainly the panel. I'm from Invent, by the way. We're a polyester weaver in West Yorkshire. What's the likelihood of getting sort of tax relief or some kind of contribution on selling eco products? And I think I give the example of electric cars. You get a lot of discount on electric cars. I myself do it through salary sacrifice. I'm not sure other people in the room do. There's now significantly more electric cars on the road than there were 4 to 5 years ago. What do we think is the likelihood of getting that kind of relief selling eco products with passports to help drive manufacturers, business to business, and then eventually direct to consumer? I think the most difficult thing for me is it costs to care. For small businesses, you have to spend a lot of money to ultimately make a big difference to the environment. Now, when you're selling direct to the consumer, you can make that back. You're selling to somebody that's got a lot more money to spend, particularly in the high-end clothing industry. But commodity products, that's more difficult. So can the government help? Can anybody think of suggestions? Are there ways to cut cost out of that value chain to drive, I guess, financial reasons to make those savings?
That's a really good question. I invite the CEO of UKFT to give an answer.
I think that was a hospital pass. Thank you, Parik. I'm actually not going to answer that question because I'm going to ask QSA team, Gerard, where are you? Christina, to answer it. And the reason I'm doing that is that QSA are leading the project looking at how an EPR scheme might work in the UK. And one of the things they're specifically focusing on, in essence, the EPR is going to impose costs on retailers and the rest of the supply chain. Simple as that. Whatever story you're told, that is what's going to happen. What the project that we're doing with QSA is looking at is there a way of flexing that scheme so eco-modulations get rewarded? But Gerard, can you?
Hi, thank you. I'm not sure if that was another hospital pass, actually. It's going to cost more. Hi, yeah, I'm Gerard Fisher from QSA Partners. So we're running an Innovate UK funded project to try and understand the data in the systems to see if we can track who is using, lower impact product compared to those who are using higher impact product, who is encouraging recycling and reuse of garments and textiles in the UK rather than exporting them and dumping them on other nations, for example. And through that, trying to work out if we can apply a fair and balanced eco-modulation system. We're seeing some of them spring up in other countries, like in France and the Netherlands, but they're, from an administration point of view, very burdensome and especially difficult for small businesses to take part in because you've got to qualify at certain volume. What we're hoping is if we can find the data and demonstrate the point, anyone could participate in it because they just have to structure their data in a certain way and it can automatically link with the system. And then you'd get that benefit. Beyond that are some policy decisions that would obviously have to be agreed with government. We're proposing that an industry-led system should help drive what we'd call a closed fund, so that wherever those fees are drawn into the system, they are then also passed on to the beneficiaries who are actually doing the hard work and doing the investment in R&D, in better material selection. There could be other aspects to it, like ethical sourcing. To start with, we're just looking at the circular aspects like recycled content.
Thank you very much. Now I want to open up the floor a bit so that you can give comments on what you want UKFT, or indeed the universities, the education providers, to help you with, what we can do more. And that will probably form some action points from here. Who wants to volunteer first?
Hi, and thanks for the opportunity and the comments from everyone. So mine is kind of like a part comment, part question, drawing on what Parik said about the need for CPD program, and also comments that have been made around the systemic nature of the sustainability problem. And I was just wondering, like, what possibilities there might be to help the industry to learn together, as opposed to, individual companies trying to sort out their staff, because I feel everyone, to a large extent, people are going to be going through, common challenges and common problems. So, for example, this is just like a similitude. It's not exactly the same, but I think, in the 90s, like the airline industry, they did something similar with British Airways setting standards for customer service. So it's not exactly the same, but just wondering whether the industry structure actually provides, that opportunity where a sort of platform can be created for people to learn together from an ecosystem perspective.
I'll actually take that, right? We already highlighted, Adam, you did, I think, of various projects that we have now, which is bringing the whole ecosystem together. Not one, there are at least 4 or 5 that we can think of. It is drawing the whole ecosystem together. There are initiatives like Textile 2030 and others, where the ecosystem is really educating each other. So I'm old enough to see this ecosystem for a long time. In the last 5-6 years, the amount of progress we have made in what you are suggesting is enormous, enormous. So I can only hope it will get better with time. But this kind of platform, and setting expectations, right, from industry, from the education establishments, from industry associations, is very important, so that we know what we expect from each other to enrich the ecosystem.
It's difficult, isn't it? But, there are 2 examples I can think of that show that we, as an industry, are trying. You'll hear this afternoon from Mark Wade, and the Textile Centre of Excellence in Huddersfield have run a sustainability professional development programme, which is effectively trying to teach their members, whoever wants to come along, how you might go about getting involved in sustainability, drawing up a policy, finding out what's important to you, next steps. This is programme 2 is about to start, or just started. Programme 1 was very successful. We, as a small business, put one of our people on it, and it was great. The second thing is that one of the other things that I do is I chair the industry steering group at Leeds University, and they are very open to taking on board direction, discussing with industry what the problems are. And for somebody who's been in the industry quite a long time, there is more contact now between educational establishments and industry than I've ever seen.
But I'll end with one example, right, to carry on with what Paul said. That there is one project which is called, funded by HRC, called Future Fashion Factory. The lead of that project, Professor Steve Russell, is here today. I am also a co-I. There are 3 universities working together: University of Leeds, University of Huddersfield, Royal College of Art, chaired by UKFT. Paul, you are part of that governance, and we are working with 600 companies. So we are bringing that ecosystem together. We can just take another question, please, and then we have
So as we're advertising, I'm Chris White from De Montfort University, and we are ready and waiting and listening to businesses, and we can offer greening your business opportunities, CPD and carbon literacy for businesses, not just the textiles industries, but a number of different industries that are struggling with materials development. And we're ready and waiting. If you want to talk to me during the course of this event, then please do. And I'm happy to take any questions about it and what you want from what a CPD might look like. We already have models of that, and we can roll anything out for you on a bespoke basis or on a larger basis. We weren't included in the triumvirate of other universities, but we're hoping to really make a bit more of an impact for this industry and others as well. So thank you for your time.
We'll definitely do it from today. I'll have a chat with you straight after this. So thank you, everybody. This is going to stay, but the conclusion is we'll all work together and face this challenge to make the ecosystem even better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Parik. Thank you, Hannah.